may not have been born in America, but America was born in me.
I'm Jose. Nice to meet you.
Are you in line?
Sir, no, but sir, there's no line.
From Nigeria.
From Brazil.
I'm an undocumented immigrant from Germany.
We mow your lawn. We work at your houses. Maybe we're your doctors. Maybe we're nurses. We're not who you think we are.
She climbed the ranks of Wall Street's most elite bank, Goldman Sachs, but she did it all, get this, as an undocumented immigrant.
A nationwide campaign is encouraging undocumented immigrants to publicly share their stories. The movement is organized by Define American.
Garrett, what do you want people to know about your status?
To help change the face of the stereotypical undocumented immigrant, and if I can come out and help share my story, hopefully that will help others come out and share their story also.
Casas says telling his story publicly has relieved a tremendous burden off of his shoulders and emboldened him to speak out on behalf of 11 million other undocumented immigrants.
Soy una luchadora y no me rindo. Así me den papeles o no me den, yo voy a seguir trabajando.
Why are we talking about white people on MTV?
Is Bensonhurst a white neighborhood?
Not anymore.
There's more Asians, and it looks like there's more of them than there is us.
If we had a discussion, like an open forum discussion, open to the entire community, about immigration, about American identity, I think that would go a long way.
I come to this work because I am the daughter of Nigerian immigrants who are actually undocumented for most of my childhood.
Cuando tú eres transgénero y aparte eres indocumentado, son dos barreras más grandes todavía.
What is this experience like for you all, being in a U.S. history classroom, being taught by a white teacher?
They always talk about the good things white people did in their history. What about the bad things when they try to get rid of us? It should be all of U.S. history.
You're here illegally, and you're basically saying, I dare you to do something about it.
These are independently sourced journalistic facts about undocumented people in this country and why they're here.
But what you cannot do is to label a person illegal. And the reason why I say this, I learned it from Elie Wiesel.
Words matter, and words can hurt. Define American is an organization that is working to fight these stereotypes.
I would like to see a television show, and I would like to see a movie where being Latin or being from anywhere else is not a handicap. That people don't succeed in spite of being Latin. They just happen to succeed because they're a person.
Okay, well, you're an American citizen, right? Believe me, I have plenty of documents. I went to the green card store personally with my grandmother. The green card store?
Immigration is also a racial justice issue. There's over 565,000 Black undocumented folks across the country.
I define American as my family.
Please welcome the Executive Director of Define American, the Reverend Ryan Eller.
Thank you, Ben. Standing on the shoulders of Harvey Milk, let me say that I'm here to recruit you. As the great-grandson of Abigail dragging canoe, I want to recruit you into a movement that reconciles with the theft of some of our ancestors. The theft even of the land that we're on now, the land of the Lenape of the Delaware Nation and the Wappinger, into a movement where we'll have an opportunity to unpack the continued destruction of colonial systems. As the grandson of Ruth Eller, an Appalachian woman who in her poverty turned to being a national prison guard, and in doing so was caught up in the continuation of that system. I want to recruit you into this difficult conversation. A conversation that, as I speak, must recognize that in my home of Appalachia, the number one driver of economic development has become the building of prisons. As a person who has been a chaplain in prison, and as a person of privilege, whose short stint in a prison cell was for standing on the side of justice, I want to recruit you into this raw, new, and uncomfortable conversation to merge together two movements that have been siloed. And as a proud citizen of a strange nation, a nation that steals land, kidnaps children, separating them from their families and concentrating them in cages, and in a nation that spreads the narratives of a dream, of liberty, of freedom, but places more people in bondage than any nation around the globe, to recruit you to form a new moral narrative for our country. And finally, as the head of Define American, I'm here to recruit you. Now, years ago, my friend Lee Hill, who at the time was one of the ministers right here across the street at Riverside Church, we took a group of young people through the Civil Rights Museum in Birmingham, Alabama. And after we took them through the museum, we had this group from my congregations in rural North Carolina, majority white kids, from his congregations from urban New York, majority kids of color, and we sat down in the park. And when you're in that park, to your left is the 16th Street Baptist Church. It's in your shadow, where 4 young girls were killed in a bombing during the Civil Rights Movement. And you are sitting amongst images and statues of police putting fire hoses and dogs on protesters. And it was in this setting that we had 4 clergy, all who had been pastors during the Civil Rights Movement, 3 of whom were white, 1 of whom was black. And of course, the first child asked the question, what was it like during the Civil Rights Movement? And we went down the line, and the first 3 pastors said, well, what you have to understand is that it wasn't like what you just experienced in the museum. We were often learning, they said, about the things that were happening on the TV news when we turned it on as well. And then the black pastor spoke, and he said, with all due respect to my well-meaning white brothers on this panel, for us, this was an everyday experience. My members were shot at. We had meetings every day at the church. And what I realized in that moment is that these 3 well-meaning white folk had missed the movement. And I said at that time, if there's a movement in my lifetime, I didn't want to miss the movement. And so ever since then, I've dedicated my career to creating platforms for marginalized people to share their story, to organize for the justice that they seek, and to be at the center of our nation's identity. So while you eat your falafel, or what's left of it, instead of taking the hour with you listening to me, I'd really rather do the vulnerable thing and turn this conversation over to you. As an ally, I've learned that one of the most important things we can do is listen. Listening not to respond, but listening for listening's sake. Resisting the urge to react and share what's on our mind first and just listen. In my personal faith tradition, we have a practice that's called call and response. You may have heard of it. And what we're about to do utilizes both of these tools, listening and call and response. So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to pose a question. And if you would, turn to your neighbors and discuss it, but practice deep listening. The call will be about 4 or 5 minutes later, right? I'm going to call on folk to share what they have heard. What resonated with you? What are you wrestling with? What are you inspired by in this difficult thing we're trying to do together in starting a collaborative movement? The response will be my urging of the conversation forward by either offering encouragement or additional questions. And for those that are participating online via the live stream, I hope you will engage as well, using the hashtag #BreakEveryCage. Folks, seeing that hashtag, we hope you will join in an online conversation with one another about these same topics. So I'm going to grab a walking mic, and when I do, I'm going to start walking around and just listening. And I hope you'll consider responding to this first question. What is broken with the current narrative in America? Is that a barrier to the policy changes that we would seek? What is broken with the narrative? That's the first question. Please share with your neighbor. If you don't know them, get to know them. Okay, family, raise your hand if you need one more minute. Okay, I saw some hand. We're going to go one more minute on this question. Let's take a quick pause. Just bring back to the center of the room. Just want to hear some of the initial conversations. What did folks hear that they want to lift up and bring into the entire room? What resonated with you that you think is needing to be shared to the entire room? Let's get a couple popcorn responses. Someone's getting called out. I'm not going to force it. We have one in the back, and then you can consider accepting that call out.
I actually had the privilege of working with Michelle Alexander. And I was speaking with her about the intersection of the criminal justice system and the child welfare system, how I had to fight for 5 years to bring my son home from being in the custody of the state. Yeah. He's actually home right now, but because I went through that system, it feels once you're in, it's hard to get out of it, even when you're out. So I called this phase in my life the Underground Railroad, because I'm continuously fighting. I'm even afraid of sending my son in public school in New York City, because those people are mandated reporters. Once a phone call is made, they know that me and my son been in the system. It would be hard for him to come home. So my son is actually out of state right now because of my contact with the system. Yeah.
Thank you.
He's 7 right now, but in 2 weeks he'll be 8. And when he came home, he actually struggled in school. When I first took him to school, because he was in the system for 5 years, when your children are in the system, they're by themselves. People don't really care about them. Nobody's investing in them. So he wasn't functioning on grade level. He was struggling in reading and writing. Because of my investment in him, he was able to actually, at the end of the school year in June 2019, he was functioning on grade level because of all the work that I did with him when he came home, the computer-based programs that I did with him at home, and every night before he went to bed, I read with him and I read to him. So everything is great now, but I'm telling people, once you're in, and you just gotta watch out. And that's the intersection between those two systems.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I have just one more question, if you're willing. If we're successful building a movement, what would your dream be for your son?
I've been fighting so hard because I knew from the beginning, and I knew the statistics, because I am lucky in my life. I was able to go to college, get a bachelor's degree, and get a master's degree. And I worked with a lot of children who were in the system. So I knew what came out of those children who were in those systems. So because of that, and I knew I couldn't allow my son to stay in the system for too long, because I know what happens to children in that system. I don't know if you guys know the statistics. 80% of children who enter the foster care system end up in prison. That's the statistics. A lot of them they become part of the child sex trafficking system, because a lot of them, you have to understand, once they age out, that's it. If the state's not getting money, nobody cares. They end up in our shelter system, they become homeless, they don't have families. A lot of the times, like myself, I was fighting to get my son to come home. They were fighting to keep my son in foster care. Because people don't understand, there's a lot of federal money in keeping children in foster care. Everybody's getting paid but the children and their parents. They fought and fought and fought me. The state of New York, the city of New York, the family court system. But to answer your question, I wanted my son to have a better life because I've worked with those children. I know what come out of that. I wanted him to be able to get a good education, to go to college, and to become a doctor, because that's what he wants to do.
Thank you for that. Thank you. There are, thank you, thousands of children, more than 4,000 just in foster care alone, that are a result in the last year and a half of the family separation policies of this administration, separating immigrant families. Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education, used to be on the board of the organization that is the recipient of most of those. And when interviewed, the families, not a single family that was fostering could respond to the question, when are these children going to be reunited with their parents? Their response instead was, I don't understand your question. They're better off. It's what we're facing together. Anything else y'all want to bring into the room? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Alexia. I'm a dean K-2 here in Harlem, grades K to 2, and I have dealt with children kindergarten through 12th grade, and in the past 2 years I've changed how I view what I need to do, because it needs to start at the beginning. What happened is that I watched a lot of children grow, kindergarten through 12th grade, graduate, and then they would always come back. And I said, if I could have addressed some of the things prior to of my noticings, I would have been able to nip some things in the bud. So I readjusted, and I'm starting at the beginning where I can catch the traumas and catch the misdiagnoses of ODD, ADHD, and all those things, because sometimes it's actually autism, or sometimes it's just a learning disability where it's a speech impediment or something other like that, and catching the mixed diagnoses that allow them to have their parents have them on medication and things like that, versus changing the narrative to the parent, which is change the diet, stop going to BJ's, stop going to Costco's, stop feeding into the systems. And you may not be able to do that because you work long hours and grandma's taking care of the baby, or they're in after school extra long. But let's have the conversation so at least some of the time there can be some healthier foods on the table. You don't have to listen to everybody that says give your child medicine and things like that. So I'm starting at the beginning so I can help catch the traumas, have the conversations with the families, and work with the whole child. And I think that is like really important, because once they get to high school, it's really hard to bring them back down. You have to find really special people to ground them and to affect them at that point. But when you catch them young, you're doing a good thing.
Thank you for that. Bishop Flunder said to me once that healed people heal people. Freed people free people. Liberated people liberate people, right? And we don't often talk about the mental health, toxic stress that many communities are facing in our movements. Yeah. Anything else folk want to bring in? Yeah.
One of the things we talked about was how, as a country, when we talk about narrative, about how we masculinize things and how we feminize things. So the things we give money towards, we masculinize. So prisons, wars. So those are the things that we masculinize. Those are the things that are important. Things we feminize are healthcare. our hospitals, education. So how we label things as a country winds up being where our dollars go and where our importance goes. And so some of the things that, and somebody was saying that sometimes it gets labeled after the fact so that it can be dismissed. And so we have to really look at how we're labeled, how things get labeled in this country, whether it's feminine or masculine, because 9 times out of 10, if it's masculinized, money's gonna go towards it. So that's why you can have private prisons. That's why you can separate children, because that's hard. That's being, that's justice. That's, we're gonna take care of these, we'll make sure these people, get justice and take their kids away from them. So it's just like, so that's a masculine narrative.
My colleague Anna is here. I don't mean to call you out, make you nervous, Anna, but she was in Gilroy the day before the shooting. Our board chair was at the concert an hour before, standing right where the shooter was. We've got to deal with this issue. It's not only access to guns, it's this narrative that's masculine, this toxic masculinity. We know it's white guys who look and talk like me that are doing the shooting. We got to deal with that. We can't silo that either. I saw a hand in the back, but if you don't mind, I'm gonna ask another difficult question, and I hope you'll come back in. And if you're not ready to get uncomfortable just a little bit, you may want to go to the restroom break right now. Okay, but there will probably be a line, so you probably better just stay in here. So here's the question. I've been doing organizing work my entire life, really. And I'm always curious at what keeps us divided, what keeps us from understanding and hearing each other. And there was a little bit of tension in the panel last night that I thought was just brilliant for this conversation. So I am wondering, what is holding us back? If we can get uncomfortable and name what is holding people back from fully joining this work of ending mass incarceration, mass detention, of fully merging a movement around criminal justice and immigrant justice. Okay? So that's the question. It's a 45-second warning. We're going to bring back the conversation. Let's reconvene. Bring it back to the center of the room. If you can hear my voice, clap once. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. Oh, it works. That's great. I should use that in church. Yeah.
We had a moment here that I think was special. It's all been special, but what got me just now going here was my history of my life and teaching over the years in Harlem and everywhere and places in the world. And I observed at a session up at Forum a couple of months ago on the 13th Amendment, and it was all about, should we change it? Should we rewrite it? What should we do with it? And what I observed was the fascinating, what turned into an extraordinary argument. And I believe in argument. I believe in discourse. I believe in confrontation. I believe in pushing it all and everything that Rashad said. But it was interesting was how the younger people, who were about 3 to 5 young people who were students, were refusing to listen to the 3 elders, meaning the older folks who were on the faculty, and what they were trying to say, and what they thought they heard, and what they wanted them to say, how they wanted them to say it. So right there alone, the issue of how were we going to build together and enable each other and support each other was so in my face, and I walked out of there very upset, actually, because I wanted to fix it. How do we talk with each other to make these things move where they need to move? So the generational differences sometimes, I think, are the issues. And a little bit of that we observed last night.
Told y'all we were going to get uncomfortable.
Hi, Ana from Guatemala. Something I wanted to share, and I'm nervous, but the conversation that just took place by Rashad and the conversation we had yesterday, I was talking to some other people how the conversation yesterday, at least in my experience, is the first time that I've ever seen these 2 topics brought together. And it's really important that it continues to happen because that is how we build solidarity. That is how we are able to change the system that was created to work the way that is been working. And in order to do so, I wanted to bring attention to the fact that the conversation that happened right before it with Rashad, the title of the conversation was Mass Incarceration and Mass Detention. And although everything that you shared was, I don't know who's here, was really important, in the whole hour, mass detention was not covered. And so if you put it in the title, and it's not your area of expertise, at least do 30 minutes one topic, 30 minutes the other. And because in my experience, I don't think that the dialogue had happened before, be vulnerable about like, hey, here's your area of expertise, here's my area. We've never had this conversation, so let's actually figure it out on stage and let's talk about how they're very similar, because the reason why the conversations have been happening in silos is because it's a tool of people keeping people oppressed. And so name it and address it, and I name it not to like nothing bad, it's just like realizing the areas of growth that we have so that we can do better next time, because I think that this conversation needs to continue to take place.
It's not easy talking in front of a lot of folk, and so thank you for bringing that and for your vulnerability in doing so. We've got to show up for one another. We don't always do that, right? I saw a hand in the back and then a hand over here. Where was, oh, yes, ma'am.
Thank you for that. I think that I'm hopeful after this gathering that things are going to begin to move in a different direction. I felt the same way last night. I think that it's important for us to understand that both movements is people of color being oppressed. And it's important for us to work together and to not disregard one movement over the other, because detention and incarceration is the same thing. They are profiting from people of color, and in the case of immigration, we are creating trauma in the life of these children that eventually, if not resolved, they're going to be going in through the criminal justice system. So we need to understand and be mindful of that, that as we begin to move forward into this movement, that we honor each other's story. Because, you know, someone said it beautifully last night, cages have existed for centuries in this country from slavery, but we can go, you know, beyond that. And thank you, Ryan, for honoring the space in which we are. You know, it's the space of my ancestors. You know, let's remember how this country was built on the genocide of Native Americans and, you know, taking their children from there. So it's, as we move forward into a movement of, you know, ending mass incarceration and detention, let's remember that it's one group of people working together for the same goal and honoring each other's story and empowering each other's story, because each of our stories are going to be very different.
Thank you. We, as I walk over, first want to recognize, first of all, thank you, Rashad, for your work and for consistently showing up. I think it's a model that we don't often see, and he's been with us at every stage. And acknowledge the point that was just made too. A couple years ago, we held the first ever convening of called First Americans and Newest Americans. It was the first time that Native tribal leaders had gotten together with immigrant freedom leaders. And my friend Kiko, who is Lakota, said, Ryan, I want to correct something you said in the intro. He said, you talked about the genocide of our people being one of our original sins. He said, the continued sin is that you continue to commit cultural genocide against our folk by erasing us from the entire narrative.
Thank you. So my name is Andy. So I want to say we did have an uncomfortable conversation. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank my discussion mates. So I think the answer to both your first question is to why is the system broken, and the second one, why we can't fix mass incarceration, is I think we are a racist country. And I think the sooner that we admit that and name that will help us to move forward. But then the question came up is, if we are a racist country, whose work is it to do? And is it the white person's work, or is it the African American's work, or someone else's work? And this is where I think we're stuck, because I will say, obviously as a white person, if it's the white person's work to do this job, I don't know if it's going to get done. And not because white people don't want to do the work, because white people don't know how to do the work. And so I think, as I think about the whole thing where we're stuck, is we are racist and there's work to be done, and we don't know whose work it is to do.
I'm going to walk over here, respond to that depth. I think Rashad said he doesn't want to see anybody showing up who's white to their organizing meetings anymore as an ally. show up at Thanksgiving dinners, our alumni centers. I like that. We've got a great comedic video about how to talk to your racist uncle when you go home from Thanksgiving on defineamerican.com.
I'm afraid that I forgot what your question was, but I do remember what my answer was. So I'll be happy to share that with you. I'm an immigrant. I grew up traumatized under German occupation in my home country, Denmark, and it's a trauma I still work on. I'm a very happy American citizen today, and I'm very happy to be here. I see thunderclouds in my mind that reminds me of my childhood, and I find it very scary. I find our country divided more than I have ever imagined it could be. It's Machiavellian, we all know. But before we despair, let's remember, wasn't it Roosevelt who said, all you have to fear is fear itself. We cannot let fear overcome us. And I happen to be a graduate from New York Theological Seminary, so I'm so happy we are in a sacred space here. And isn't it wonderful that we are meeting all here in good spirit and in good sense of cooperation to work on these issues together. And I thank you all for organizing this and for all you are doing and all New York Union Seminary is doing. So thank you very much.
Sometimes I had a deacon once say to me, you don't really need to preach if the singing has been so good before it. You just shut up and stop. And I'm not going to respond. That's what I will ask as we begin to wrap is in 2 sentences or less. One, if you can do it. If you would just turn to your neighbor on that note and describe to them what gives you hope. So the video that we're going to show as we begin to exit and go into workshops, 1 more minute, 30 seconds. How about 30 seconds? Okay, good. So if you had the blessing of going to my colleague Khadijah's workshop earlier today, you heard a little bit about our 21 Savage campaign, the campaign to free the rapper 21 Savage from immigration detention. This, what you're about to see is one product of that campaign, and I just wanted to introduce it mainly to give the disclaimer that although Define American gave the stories of impacted communities, we did not choose all of the celebrities. Okay, so these celebrities were not our choices. And I hope once it ends, we will take it just as one sign and signal to think about what it is we can do in the workshops ahead to move this movement forward.
Getting falsely accused to be a criminal because of your skin color.
Getting your morning coffee.
Leaving the grocery store.
Riding a train. Serving meals to the homeless.
Standing up for what you believe in.
Detained during scheduled immigration check-in.
Taking your pregnant wife to the hospital.
Driving with your tail light out. Heading to prom.
Visiting your son in the army.
Hailing a cab.
Escaping violence in your home country.
Simply waking up.
While jogging. Leaving the house put out the surgery.
Going to work in the morning.
Having a tattoo.
Dropping kids off at school.
Seeking asylum after getting attacked for being gay.
Getting detained 1 week before the Grammys.
In other words, living in America.
These instances can happen to anyone, especially if you're a person of color.
No person in this world deserves to be treated like this. The time for change is now.
So free 21 and free any immigrant family that's been unfairly targeted.
We're asking you to get involved by signing the Free 21 Savage petition. Find the link in the comments.
Share this video and share your support.
Can we give one more round of applause to Ryan Eller? And now one more brief moment of housekeeping. If you're looking for the Spiritual Foundations of White Supremacy workshop with Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas and Reverend Dr. Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, you are in the right place. Just stay here and we'll start in a moment. If you're looking for Tyranny in Small Numbers, an Asian American and Pacific Islander reality in the intersection of criminal justice and immigration with Eddie Zhang, please go to room 205. And if you're looking for Borders and Blocks, Ending Law Enforcement Violence with Erica Purnell, Reverend Niall Fort, Dr. Alex Vitale, and Ravi Ragbir, please go to room 207. Thank you.